Hello, welcome back. This summer I bought my Festool Domino, a tool I've wanted for quite some time. Some years ago my parents bought me this budget biscuit jointer which I've had in the small loft workshop for a number of years. Putting the two tools at the side of each other, it's amazing how similar they are. Of course it shouldn't really be that surprising, the two tools are designed to do the same thing. Insert a small piece of wood into two opposing faces to join them together. I understand the biscuit jointer cost my parents £30 around about 10 years ago from the shopping chain Netto. They bought 3 of these machines, one for my brother, one for my dad and one for myself, and all 3 are still going strong. Where the Festool cost the wife might be watching. So I have a project that requires 2 identical cabinets, so I thought I would use the biscuit jointer and the domino as a test to see if there is any real difference between the 2 machines. So for this project I'm using a number 20 biscuit and a 4mm domino which is the same thickness. One advantage of the domino is that you can use different thicknesses depending on the size of the material you're joining together. You're stuck with the 4mm thick biscuit, although they do have 0, 10s and 20s which are slightly different size ovals. I pretty much always have my biscuit jointer set up for 20mm thick stock with a number 20 biscuit. I've actually never bought any other biscuit than a number 20. But the domino I needed to set up for this 4x20 and the 1-inch plain timber which is finished around about 21mm. So I'm using the 22mm setting on the domino. So now my machine is set up, it's time just to cut some timber over at my Festool cutting station. For the long side of the cabinet I'm inserting 5 dominoes or biscuits, and for the shorter pieces just 3. And I make a pencil mark where I would like to machine these holes. The domino has these sprung stops, so I don't need to mark out the end domino as long as the pieces are the same length. Festool do sell a gadget that actually means you can cut the dominoes at equal centres down the piece of timber, but for the price of a pencil I can't really see the point in buying that kit. So for my first unit I insert all my dominoes to make up the sides, the top and bottom panels. When I make my panels I like to alternate the growth rings on the pieces to ensure the panel stays as flat as possible. It's a method that has always worked well for me. Once my stock is all dominoed, I can then glue it together, clamp it and leave it to dry for a few hours. I have a few of these panels for the entire build, so it took me a few days just to get through all the processes that you see over the next few minutes. Where some of my pre-planed boards wouldn't fit together very well, I ran them over my DeWalt saw with my tapering jig to ensure I had 2 really straight edges. It's a great way of processing panel edges if you've not got a jointer. Like the panels with the dominoes, the biscuit jointed panels were machined in exactly the same way. The only difference is the biscuit jointer doesn't have a way of referencing from the edge, so you need to add an additional pencil line to reference from at the end of each board. Now one thing that the biscuit jointer can do that the domino can't is make a long groove. I find this beneficial sometimes, and I've also used it in other ways when, for example, fitting a sill to the bottom of a window frame. If you're willing to play around with the biscuit jointer, you can actually also produce some small rebates or quirks. For example, you may want to inset a panel into the back of a unit. The domino does have 3 settings that lets you elongate the hole by a certain degree. After gluing up all the panels with the 2 machines, there was no difference in the quality or the flatness of the joints. To complete the paneling process, the panels were cut to width and length at my saws. To fasten my cabinets together, I'm going to use a biscuit or a domino at the end of the top and bottom and into the inside face of the end panels. Firstly, the dominoes were cut into the ends of the top and bottom panels. To cut them into the inside face of the side panels, the domino comes with this little extension that just creates more surface area to balance the domino on. These joints I'm mostly using the sprung lug to reference from again. I can't do it all the way around because the two sides are asymmetric. So on that side I needed to reference from two pencil marks. And then the dominoes can be set into the holes to line up all the components. I am not gluing the boxes up here as they're going to be transported to their final place. I was interested to see whether the dominoes would hold the joints together on their own, and the answer is no, they don't. So I just inserted a screw to keep them together while I worked on them. To fix the other cabinet together was exactly the same process, but with the biscuit jointer. Just in this case I had to make pencil lines all the way around as I have got no stop to reference from. For the cuts into the side panels at 90 degrees, it was a little more trickier with the biscuit jointer. Firstly, there's no base plate extension that can be screwed on to increase the surface area. So on such a narrow piece, the machine was trying to rotate on its axis away from the face of the wood. Now bear in mind, this is a budget machine, and I'm sure the lack of casting is reflected in that price. Maybe a more expensive biscuit jointer would have a solid face to reference from like the domino does. The question was, unlike the domino, would the cabinet hold itself together with just the biscuit joints? No, it won't. I'm sure if I used a bigger domino with a larger surface area, it may hold itself together here. So because I had a lot of panels and a lot of glue up time and a lot of hanging around, in amongst gluing up the panels, I just did a few experiments on other type of joints. First of all, I made a 45-degree cut to some 2x1 and then cut a domino and a biscuit. This would replicate, say, a face frame to the cabinets that I'm making. Inserting the domino was really easy using the spring reference plates from the long part of the mitre, and it was no harder to insert a biscuit in the centre of this joint. The only difference was I only had number 20 biscuit, which was slightly too large for this cut. When fitting an intermediate shelf in a unit, it's quite easy with both machines. Mark out the position of the dominoes or biscuits and then lay the material on top of each other so you can use the edge and the face to reference from. It's harder to get the process worked out in your head than it is to actually do the machining. Once you've done a few, it becomes second nature. Now I cannot take the credit for this next little trick. I saw it somewhere on YouTube, thank you whoever it was that was showing this, so I thought I'd have a play around. This is to use a pair of dominoes that can be used for flexible shelving. And the domino sits just in the bottom edge of the shelf, so it took a lot of playing around with the height adjustment just to get it in exactly the right place. Now this is pretty specific to the domino. You could do it with a biscuit, but I don't think it'd look that good in the face of your shelving units. To use this for shelving, you would have to put a series of domino cuts in up the inside face of your shelving units, which should look a little bit like this. This is my outdoor workbench top where I use dominoes instead of dogs. And on this build I also used a domino to restrain a captive nut on my vise. And also over the last few months I've used my domino to insert some slots for some screws on my fence. I fixed some nosings on my seats. And I've used a larger domino bit to cut some mortises rather than cutting them by hand. So in conclusion, is the domino better than the biscuit jointer? And other than cutting specific mortises in some projects, it's not. If you want to glue panels together and units together, both machines will perform exactly the same. But saying that, the Festool Domino is a very well made tool, and I won't be giving mine back anytime soon. Thanks for watching, I'll see you on the next one.